Hi, this is Nancy Reynolds. Welcome to the bonus bundle of Cottage Rose. It's a lovely Abigail Rose Designer Series paper with a Cottage Rose stamp set. It's just gorgeous. But what I wanted to show you is a little watercoloring technique because you can watercolor on Designer Series paper. And also the fun fold. I don't know the name of it, but it's just a fun little fold. It goes flat for mailing. And then the sentiment is on the back. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to set this aside. The first thing I'd like to show you is a little bit of, because we want it to have time to dry, a little bit of watercoloring. I have done most of the watercoloring already. This is Flirty Flamingo, Parakeet Party, Highland Heather. I just used a wink of Stella on these flowers, and I want to use a Daffodil Delight on this flower. So I'm going to get something I don't care if it gets wet. We'll put it down right here. I know it's dirty, but, well, it is a little distracting, isn't it? Let's take it off. I will find very quickly another sheet of paper we can draw on. And we can get all messy and icky. Here is half a sheet of the grid paper, and I'll just set this down here. We'll put our picture on top of it, and this is how I watercolored. I took a block, and I took my ink, dipped the block into the ink, making sure I picked up quite a bit, because this is a larger picture. Yes, my ink is going to need refilled after this. And then I brought in one of our watercolor painters. And I just dropped a drop. And the noise you hear in the background is my new kitty. Her name is Olivia. She is a 17-year-old ragdoll cat. And even though it's not 5 o'clock, she thinks it's dinner time. There is food in her dish. And then I just watercolored lightly the paper. I didn't get it really soaking. I wanted some spots that would be a little darker. And so I went up here at the top where there was a little less water. And I will do the bottom that way. If you're going to be changing colors, you want to make sure you've got a rag handy so you can wipe it off and make sure it's clean, because you don't want to transfer one color to another. Let's see, I think this would be nice darker. See how quick it is? I'm just shading in the lines that the artist already has there, using minimal water, although there is water in my brush. You could also use a re-inker and just put a drop of re-inker on your block. And now I'm going to put another drop of water. Oh, I did more than a drop. Smush up all the rest of that ink in here. And just go over lightly the rest of the flower. So I've got some color. Pick up a little bit. I think I'm going to put Wink of Stella. I wasn't sure what color I was going to put in the center of the Highland Heather flowers, but I think I'm just going to use a little Wink of Stella. But this is how I colored this entire picture. Didn't take long at all. And it actually stayed pretty flat. I was playing with it and curling up the corners. That was my fault. And what I have with me is a little tray with a damp rag in it. And I am just going to clean off my brush. With the older stamp cases, I was able to just squeeze my ink pad hard enough to get ink in the lid. And so I didn't do this step, but I have not been able to do that with these. I think it's maybe I'm a little older and the arthritis in the fingers are is a little more pronounced. Looks like there's still a little yellow there, so I'll run some more water. And I will finish that up when we're done. But I just wanted you to see what I was doing. I'm going to grab that Wink of Stella right now and just put a little Wink of Stella in the middle of these flowers. It'll make a nice little sparkle. And this is going to, the seed heads here are also going to get Wink of Stella. So there, our focal piece is done. And now we're going to get on to the next step, which is I want to show you. So the coloring really wasn't the highlight of this. It's the fold that we're doing and converting it to metric. And I want to also show you why I converted it to metric. And it's not just straight across because there's a difference in card size. So 2 things I'm using is the Cottage Rose stamp set. I'm using the sentiment Feel Better Real Soon. And Go to Greetings, I did Thinking of You. And instead of stamping, you could certainly stamp your flower and use the Memento ink and your blends, and you can color your flower. It's got a nice big flower that you can cut out. I decided just to go with the flower on the Designer Series paper. And you can see that here. Although this is cut down for another purpose, I just cut out a full flower and colored it in. There's 2 or 3 you can cut out. And I've got bits and pieces too. Setting this aside, I'll put it up there so I can't lose it. This is our card base. It's 5.5 by 8.25. So 8.25 by 5.5. Or if you were doing metric, you would use a piece. Well, I'm going to do the metric later. Let me do this first. Just show you the scoring. For me, it's easiest to score. I love our paper trimmer. I don't know if you have the paper trimmer, but it's wonderful because it scores. It cuts and it scores, and the score blade stays right here. So I am scoring at 2 inches. So the one thing you do need to remember that you use your score blade, not your cutting blade, and 3 1/8 inches. So 3 1/8, as we all know, so there's 3, 3 1/4, 3 1/2, 3 3/4, and then 4. So if you go halfway between the 3 and the 3 1/4, you've got 3 1/8. So there we are. And then I'm going to turn this and do the very same thing on the other side. So first is 2 inches, and then 3 1/8. And then I'm going to set this aside. And I don't know, can you see this? You can see the square lines. This one is going to stand up. And this one is going to be the wings. Let's call them the wings. And there it is, all scored. One thing you do want to do, though, remember this is a fun fold, and you want to make sure your score lines are well defined. So you want to burnish them with your bone folder. Sorry. And there we are. And then it will stand like this. That's the hard part. The next thing I did is I took a piece of Highland Heather cardstock and I embossed it. And so that this piece is 5 1/4 by 5 1/2. And it's important, the 5 1/4, if you look at it, is going on our decoration because you can have a little border around it. So that's how you know the size. I used the Painted Posies 3D embossing folder, which is sideways. I'm not sure why, but it is. and I put my plain cardstock in and ran it through the embossing folder. The embossing cut and, oh my goodness, my mouth is not working. The Stamp and Cut and Emboss machine. And I just wanted to remind you of that sandwich. This is a 3D embossing folder. So we use plate 1. And this is my old one. It's the same size as our new plate 1. I just have this old one out. And you're going to put on number 4, which is for 3D embossing. And then you just run it through, and you magically get this beautifully dry embossed piece of cardstock. I love these flowers. I think they add a lot to the card. Then we're going to do a little cutting. Scoring blade up, cutting blade handy. And our pieces are, it's 5 1/4. So we're going to cut a piece at 1 3/4 inches. 1 3/4. And then we're going to do 2 inches. And then our last piece is also going to be 1 3/4. And I believe, well, that is just about perfect, isn't it? Yay! Okay, here we are. Then it's just very simple to take your Tombow glue, the green glue, as we all lovingly know it. You want to use glue when you're doing something that's embossed because there's a lot to adhere. There's some that is embossed and that's debossed. So you just need to make sure. This was the first one I cut off. Just making sure. I like it all to make a picture. You really don't have to, but it makes me happy to know that it's continuous. It starts here. The middle section I cut is here, and then the end is over here. Call me a little bit compulsive about that. When you're putting a large flower in the middle, however, nobody is going to notice that. I'll just flatten this out. And if you're ever in any wonder, what color cardstock am I going to use when you get designer series paper or something like this, black sets off everything beautifully. White is always nice, but I just think, and for this card anyway, with the Highland Heather, the black was the perfect choice. Our card is almost done. I took and I put this on. See, I'm going to put it like this. So I turned it over, and then I grabbed my Stampin' Dimensionals because I wanted to make sure that I didn't go over. Might be another good time to flatten it out. And I'm always okay with a little bit around the edges being loose that maybe curl up a little bit. I always try when I take these off to put them right into my garbage can. Less chance of me finding them anywhere, all over the house. So here we go. Here's our card. We'd always make sure that our focal point doesn't extend beyond the folded card. I did a little bit. Whoops. Because we want it to go in the envelope. Before I finish this up, let's see. Will this be a problem? No, it will be fine. Okay. Let's go on. What I did for the bow is I used my linen thread and I pulled off a piece that was fairly long. Did you know that you can straighten this out all those curlicues make it hard to tie. You're just going to straighten it out with your bone folder. It won't be perfect, but it's much easier to work with that way. I'm going to cut a piece, and then I just wanted a bow with lots of interest, so I will have, it's 4 strands, and I'm looking for my bow jig, hoping I cut this long enough. If not, it'll be 3 strands. Let's go under. And then, this is where I had some trouble before, is getting those little ends through. See if tools will help me. There. And give it a pull. So here we go. We've got our bow. I'm just going to cut those little ends. And this side is a little longer than that side, so I think I'm going to trim it. And just set it right there because we need a sentiment. And I used the Highland Heather ink with my Thinking of You. And just make sure I've got this on straight. That doesn't look too bad. Yep. And I've got a nice long strip. You know how that when you're cutting down your basic white to, oh, a little crooked, to card inside size, you're taking a little bit off. I keep those strips. That's better, not perfect. We might go with not perfect. Yep, I think I like this one better. And all I did not use my ribbon and scissors, honest. I used my regular snips and I cut just a little bit of an angle. And then I'm going to put this out of the way. I realized that one of the things I didn't have out is a little tiny strip of Highland Heather. Let me grab one. Let's see. I keep all my cardstock in a 2-drawer filing cabinet, which works really well. And then I have these little folders. They're just file folders that I cut the top of and packing taped the sides. And this is where I get my bits and strips. How is that? Perfect. A little bit of Tombow glue, I think. I'm just going to line it up with, that's where I want my margin to be for the edges. And then this is how hard it was. I eyeballed it. And then I cut it. And then I did trim it up a little bit. But there we go. Got a nice little Highland Heather border around our sentiment. We'll put our sentiment on flat. I think since I've got the Tombow glue out, I'll just keep using it. I'm going to put it right here. How's that looking? Fairly straight. I'm going to give it a little pinch. And then I want to grab one of my glue dots for my bow. And I just put that right above my thinking of you and kind of tried to stretch out there we are. Now, one thing I didn't do is I have a piece 2 inches by 5¼ inches, same size as this piece that's going on the inside. So let's take our Highland Heather ink. I've been a little short of get well cards lately, so I think this was a good idea. I always feel better if I've stamped first before I put it on my paper. This was pretty straight. There we are. And then in my case, the Cottage Rose case, I had a lot of fun. Oh, let me close this up before I can make a mess. I keep, there's the die cuts and the stamps. And I usually have it in, there is a little bit, a small envelope with die cuts that I thought I would just use one of these days. And while I didn't use petal pink, I think since it's on the back, that'll be just fine. I'm just going to take one of them. And I'm going to dot just dot a little bit. This would have been really good to cut out with the adhesive sheets, but I didn't think about that. So it didn't get done. I grab my silicone sheet because I might hang over the bottom. It does hang over the bottom. Put this on the bottom just for pretties. Oop. Let me see if I can get that moved over. That's the one good thing about the green glue, is you've got a little time to make adjustments. I'm going to turn it over and cut off the bottom. And I don't like white done with the Tombow, adhered with it, because the Tombow tends to, I can see the lines, and I don't like the lines. So I get my seal out for that. And now we'll put this in the middle. And basically our card is done. I'll show you how I made the envelope, how I fixed the envelope. And I'll put on the embellishments, my little butterflies. But first I want to talk about metric. Countries that use, other than the US and Canada, pretty much use cardstock that is a different size than ours. It is 29.9 centimeters by 21 centimeters, I believe. I don't have the full piece written out, but this is cardstock cut from, in metric, from the larger sheet of paper. And I used a 12 by 12 piece of paper and cut it down. If I'm making a template that I want to keep, I use the backing to the designer series paper. It's a great one. But I'm not going to be making a lot of metric cards with this fold. So, for one thing, it doesn't fit into our envelopes in the United States. But basically, it is 14.9 by 21 centimeters. I scored it at 4.8, 7.6, then I turned it over and I scored it at 4.8 and 7.6, and then I folded it. Now this was after more than one try. I played around point 1.2, and until I got the right measurement so it would fit together the way the Imperial one does. I got a piece of designer series paper, 14.9, and I cut it 14.9 by 14.4. The 14.4, the smaller side, is the one that is going to fit for mounting and layering it onto our card. So it's 4.3 centimeters, and I cut. Then I went 5 centimeters and I cut. Then I went another 4.3 centimeters and cut it. And I had a little bit left over. And that is because metric and Imperial paper is different. Imperial is taller and narrower. Ours is shorter and fatter. So I just wanted to let you see how it looks. So here's and I purposely chose something that would be great contrast. And these measurements are, of course, in the PDF. If you're watching this on YouTube, in a few weeks, I will have measurements up. You could measure this and make it a little bit shorter, but I didn't think that was a lot to waste, and you could use it, running down the side. Instead of doing this at the bottom, do a little something on the side. Would be pretty. So it's not wasted. I just wanted to show you. And the finished card, pretending this is our card base, as you can see, this out of the way, narrower and taller than our card base. So that is metric, and I wanted to show you how I came up with the numbers, because believe me, I did go through a little bit of that cardstock before I had it figured out. And I probably will put that away somewhere so I know to look again. Let's go ahead now with our embellishment. I'm going to get my Take Your Pick tool, another one of my favorite tools. It's got this little putty end, and I just kind of mess with it a little, warm it up a tiny bit. It is wonderful for taking off the little butterflies. And I think I'm going to use the large ones. I'm just going to put one there. And I'm going to take a large one and I'm going to put it up here. And another one. Let's see. I wanted to show. So how about right here? So we have 3 butterflies. Wink of Stella on all the little flower points, on these flowers, on the centers of the Highland Heather flowers. And our card is done. But we have a pretty card, and we have a pretty place to write our name and a little message. Let's have a pretty envelope. I think it's a whole package. So what I've got is I have a piece of designer series paper, and I tend to cut my designer series paper. I take the 12 by 12 and I cut it in half, and then I turn it, and I cut 4 and 4. So I've got 6 card fronts, which works really nicely because it's a little big, but I can grab one for the back of my envelope flap, because we've got lots of cardstock, and designer series paper, and we want to use more. I think I want that flower, the big one on the back. Make sure it's glued down. We do not want to make the Postal Service angry with us. So I use plenty of glue. I burnish it down, and then I take from the back side and trim it to match the flap. And then once I've got this cut off, I grab my trimmer and I cut off, about 1/2 inch, sometimes 3/4 of an inch Oh, that was my sewing blade. There's the cutting blade. So I have a nice strip to go across the bottom of my envelope. And I use my silicone mat because glue doesn't stick to it. Hot glue doesn't stick to it. Regular glue doesn't stick to it. Snail doesn't stick. Snail, that was from a long time ago. Seal doesn't stick to it. Trim off the end. And there we are. We very quickly have a very pretty envelope to go with our card. And I hope that you're enjoying all of the tutorials for the Cottage Rose Suite. I have really enjoyed playing with it. The one I made a few days ago and the one I made today. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you will give it a try. And until I see you again or talk to you again, happy stamping. Bye-bye.